Hello beautiful people, my name is Vendi and I'm here to bring you my February wrap-up. So February was a pretty busy month for me, what with midterms coming up at the end of it, but I still managed to read a full 7 books this month. While 7 books might not be a huge number of books to have read in a month, I thoroughly enjoyed every single one, so I consider this month a pretty solid reading month for me. Because I like the selection of books I picked for this month so much, I'm probably going to have a lot to talk about, so without further ado, let's get started. The first book that I read in February was Jane Unlimited by Kristen Kishore. Jane Unlimited is a choose-your-own-adventure, multi-genre portal fantasy novel of sorts. If that description sounds kind of like a combination between ridiculous and amazing, then I did a really good job because that is exactly what this book is. It follows our titular character Jane as she's sort of whisked away onto this magical realism-ish island that belongs to a college friend of hers. I don't want to say too much about the plot of Jane Unlimited, mostly because there are 5 separate actual plots to the story, and secondly because I think that it's one best enjoyed if you know very little about it going in. My favorite part of Jane Unlimited was the lady characters. We have not one, but 2 queer lady characters who actually end up getting together by the end of Jane Unlimited, and neither one of them dies. And I know the bar is set super low, but that's a pretty big rarity in any sort of media, so I was really excited to see it happen. And the other ladies, whether they were queer or not, were allowed to be unlikable and prickly and not dainty and feminine, and I absolutely adored that. Like I said, Jane Unlimited is a sort of choose-your-own-adventure novel, by which I mean there are 4 separate endings to this story. Each one of them belongs to a different genre of book. All of them are wonderful and whimsical and weird in their own right, and I just love every single one of them. I can't choose one that's a favorite over another. I can see, however, how that disjointedness might be a potential problem for some readers. The book is just about 500 pages long, with the first 70-80 pages being the beginning part of the story that anchors the rest of it, which are the 4 separate endings. So while the book is the length of a full-length novel, each separate story in it is about the length of a novella. So if you're not a fan of short stories, then beware of that because they might feel incomplete. I personally didn't have that problem, and I really liked every twist in Jane Unlimited, and I ended up giving it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I finished in February was Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales by, obviously, the Brothers Grimm. I say completed because I had started this book I don't even know how long ago. And I've been working on it in little pieces at a time ever since, maybe December of last year. I can't really get into a synopsis of Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales because there's literally hundreds of short stories in here, all with their own distinct plots. But I will say that it was a very interesting read in that it gave a lot of insights into the history of German folklore because most of these stories started as oral traditions. For the most part, I thought they were interesting, but because of their oral nature, there were a lot of stories that felt a little bit repetitive. And I'm not going to describe them to you because you probably know most of the popular ones anyway, so I'll just leave it at that and say that I gave Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales a 4.5 out of 5 stars. After finishing that, I read Demon in the Wood, a short story about the Darkling from Leigh Bardugo's Grisha trilogy. I'm holding up a copy of the new paperback version of Ruin and Rising because the Demon in the Wood is actually in this one at the very end as a sort of bonus content. So I absolutely love me a good villain origin story, and I absolutely love morally gray, complex characters, so The Demon in the Wood was basically exactly that in a nice little bite-sized piece of fiction. It added nuance that I think the truly evil character of the Darkling needed to be more human. I think it's definitely necessary to the story, but I can't see where this backstory could have been effectively told within the original trilogy, so I'm glad that Leigh Bardugo did make it a bit of bonus content. Regardless, it sort of rewoke in me this passion to read this series because I absolutely loved it, and I've loved it for a very long time now, and I think I'll be reading it through a different lens because I know some of the heartbreaking backstory about the Darkling now that I didn't before. If you're a fan of the Grisha trilogy, I highly recommend checking out The Demon in the Wood. I gave it a full 5 out of 5 stars because it felt very complete. The characters were wonderful. It was just a really good time to read. Following that, I did something that's a little bit different for me, and I read a graphic memoir, which is Persepolis II by Mariana Sartrapi. I'm so sorry for butchering that name. If any of you know how to pronounce it, please let me know in the comments below. So the story behind me reading this book is that I'm a fool. I didn't realize, despite there being a 2 in the title, that this was actually a sequel. Regardless, I don't think I was really spoiled for anything because I think this one stands as its own story. I've heard that Persepolis I is more of a overview of Iran through Mariana's childhood, whereas Persepolis II very much centers her. It's more of a coming-of-age story than anything else, and it's told entirely in graphic novel form with some really simplistic art design that I just really liked. I thought it was a really interesting way to sort of give some autobiographical information, and I think it was really effective at that. My only issue with Persepolis II was that the ending felt a little bit cliffhanger-y, like it wasn't an entirely completed story. I know that's probably meant to mimic the way that life works, where it doesn't really wrap up at the end of a story, but as it is meant to be a complete narrative piece, I do feel like there could have been some sort of definitive conclusion. I don't know, I just felt a little bit unsatisfied with how it ended, which brought my rating down to 4.5 out of 5 stars. After that, I got back into the novel swing of things and I read How to Make a Wish by Ashley Herring Blake. Y'all, February was truly a good month for reading positive bisexual representation in books. I've tried several times now to give a quality synopsis of this book, and I don't think it should be that difficult, because it's a contemporary and they tend to be a little more simplistic than fantasies to describe, or at least I thought so up till now. To make a long story very, very, very short and simple, How to Make a Wish follows my beautiful, precious Grace as she meets this girl called Ava, and the two of them sort of discover how to be human and women loving women in a world that hasn't treated either of them very well up until this point. This book has changed my mind on contemporaries 100%. I always thought I was a sci-fi fantasy girl because I thought that those worlds were, for whatever reason, more compelling than a contemporary story could ever be, but oh boy was I wrong. Grace's family drama is pretty foreign to me. I am fortunate enough to have a really loving, close family. But I have had friends who have absent parents, and the way that I see it affect them is very similar to the way that Grace's absent mother affects Grace in her day-to-day life. Ashley Herring Blake's portrayal of Grace sort of coping with the fact that she's been raising her own self since childhood is painful and raw and almost too realistic. I cried several times while reading this book, and not just because I felt understood as a bisexual girl for the first time in a book ever. I will say that the drama in How to Make a Wish gets a little bit over the top, but I don't care. I don't care at all. I forgive every little bit of lack of realism because of the love between Grace and Ava. Their tentative, fragile, budding love at the beginning and the strong bond it turns into by the end of the story is so real. It is exactly what it's like to fall in love with a woman as a woman. I just felt so understood by this book. I wish that it had existed when I was 13 or 14 years old and just slowly coming to terms with who I am. I gave How to Make a Wish 5 out of 5 stars. If you're a bi girl or you have a bi girl in your life that you just want to understand, pick up this book. If I didn't think representation mattered until this moment, this book would have changed my opinion on that. I love it so much. I know I'm going to be rereading it time and time again. Read How to Make a Wish. After that, I read one of my most anticipated 2018 releases, The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. So The Hazelwood follows Alice, a girl who, with her mother, has never stayed in one place too long because bad luck seems to follow her wherever she goes. This cycle continues until one day Alice and her mother receive a letter informing them that Alice's grandmother has died on her estate, the Hazelwood. Alice's mom thinks that now the troubles will stop following them, but one day she goes missing and Alice finds out that the fairy tales that her grandmother was writing are all too real. So The Hazelwood is described by Melissa Albert herself as a fairy tale noir sort of novel, and I absolutely have to agree. I really loved this story. However, I think I would have loved it more if I didn't go into it having heard that tagline, fairy tale noir. I loved the gritty noir feels of The Hazelwood. I just thought that there would be a little more fairy tale to balance them out, and because that's what I expected when I didn't get it, I felt a little bit cheated. The fairy tale elements are very strong, and the whole narrative is a very, very strong one. There's so many beautiful, quotable lines within Melissa Albert's prose. I almost can't believe it's a debut novel. But like I said, my own expectations sort of ruined it a little bit for me. I ended up giving it a 4.25 out of 5 stars, so I still really enjoyed it. but I think I'm going to enjoy it more on subsequent rereads because I'll know what to expect. And the final book that I read in February was Sight Witch by Susan Dennard. I actually just got done filming a review of this book, so I'm not really going to go into it here. Basically, Sight Witch is a novella prequel to Truth Witch and Wind Witch, so the Witchland series, by Susan Dennard, and I think it's absolutely phenomenal. It follows Ryber, one of Captain Merrick's shipmates, before she was on his ship, so when she was still in the Sight Witch convent. And she basically finds out that she needs to save the world. It's great. I loved it. It was a little short for me, which is the only thing I disliked about it, and I gave it a 4.25 out of 5 stars overall. Review to come. And there you have it, guys. This lineup is the books that I read in February of 2018. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure to give me a thumbs up, and if you like me, maybe subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Until then, thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.